Rasanath. Hare Krishna. How are you? You're muted. You're muted. Can you hear me? You're muted.
Okay, 1 second.
Oh, there you go.
Can you hear me now? Yeah. I had a dream of you
I
yesterday.
got the wrong headphones on. Do I have the wrong? Hold on a second. Sorry. Okay, can you hear me now?
I had a dream of you yesterday.
Oh, really? That's auspicious for me.
Yeah, it was so interesting. We were actually serving on a project together. Like we have been
I had a
assigned.
dream of you last night too.
It's so crazy. We have like.
I did. I had a dream about you last night. Tell me what yours was. I mean, I don't know where people are coming in, but I had a dream about you last night too.
Weird.
We were serving on a project.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did. I did have that. The details are vague. Hi, Lucinda.
Hey, listen now.
Yeah. Oh, hi.
It looks like a very comfortable sweater.
It is. It is absolutely very comfortable. Yeah. How are you, Dale?
I'm doing good. It's good to see you. Is it cold where you are?
Oh my gosh. So I actually, where I'm living, it was just built, the place. It's like just like a little barn kind of thing. And there's like a mold problem.
Oh, no.
So I have to keep the air on, which I really don't like. Like I love to have the natural air.
Yeah.
But for now, until they figure out what's going on, I just,
yeah.
I know. It's so silly. It's like 90 degrees.
Yeah, it's strange. Well, sometimes the air conditionings can do that. It blasts it so much, it's like it's freezing inside.
Yeah, it's so true. Yeah.
Are you in New York or?
I'm in New Jersey. Yeah.
New Jersey.
Yeah. And where are you in New York?
I'm in Brooklyn.
Oh, how has it been?
It's been, we're just here. Did you ever meet our dog, Jiva?
No, he's so cute though.
He is a little cute. He's been our little light of COVID,
Oh.
keeping us going. So it's been a real blessing. So he's here and he's growing, and yeah, everyone had babies this last year. We had a dog.
Oh, well, it will prepare you.
Yeah, or we'll just stop there.
Or you'll just stop. Yeah, whatever feels good.
We'll just have more dogs.
Aw.
Yeah, it's really good to see you. I'm glad you're here.
You too. Yeah, I'm really grateful. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's Allegra.
Allegra.
Hey, Allegra.
What a joy to see all your faces, every one of you.
Good to see you.
Wonderful.
I know, it's a gift to see you.
Yeah. Are you in New Vrindavan, Allegra?
I am. This is the one morning yet I haven't had another obligation.
Oh, I'm glad you're here. I have an email that I need to respond to you on. Yeah. So
I have faith.
Thank you. Keep the faith. Yes. Oh, yeah.
We had Pushpa Abhishek last night, and even though it was a little just adjusted because of COVID. Well, and you had your own yesterday as well. I think it was just so wonderful. Just the mood. We haven't had that in long all summer. So really special.
Yeah, it was really. We did have that yesterday, and it was
Yeah.
really, really sweet. It was really, really well organized and managed. Gorsharan and Daniel and the team here, and Yadanath and Akanta Bhakti were helping, and it was really, really well done and smooth, and it was just really, really beautiful. There's a darshan, there's a little kirtan, and people were just coming in and out. There was very few people there, and so but it was just like really, really, really sweet and smooth and just kind of well done. Yeah, little darshan. It's just like an hour, like 5 to 6, little walk-in darshan. Kind of felt like in India, like where you wait in line to get into the darshan, you get like 10 seconds, then you kind of move on out. And yeah, sweet. Yeah, Hari Bol Yadanath and Akanta Bhakti. Walking in.
Hi, Bol.
Bol.
Yeah. Whoops. Hi, Krishna. Yeah, our setup is such that sometimes we leave the camera off because we're not actually sitting in front. We're sitting over here off camera where it's more comfortable, and we look at it on the TV. We put the computer to the TV. So anyway, when our camera's off, that's usually why.
What, do you have a TV?
No. Why? What did I didn't say that. It's going to be one of those classes, is it? Great. See ya.
That was the plan.
Yeah. Yeah. Shravanam Kirtan Vishnu Netflix. Galaxy J3 Prime, glad you're here. Beautiful. Yeah. Do you like to give it a few minutes, or do you start right away? What would you
Then we can get started.
get started, or wait?
2 more minutes. Just give
2
it
more
a
minutes.
couple
Okay.
minutes.
11:05.
And we can get started.
Perfect. Great. Nice. Are you and Vren in separate rooms?
Well, the baby is sleeping, so
Yeah.
she's there. She can't speak right now.
Yeah. Don't speak too loud.
only hearing.
When I first came on, did I hear that Allegra is in New Brindavan?
Yeah, I've been there for 3 months.
3 months there.
Mhm.
Was that specifically to get away from the climate here? I mean, the COVID climate here?
It was a special opportunity, that I normally don't have. Normally all my days are accounted for, so it was a really special opportunity to be able to do this.
Oh, good. Good for you. Cool.
And you guys are just in Jersey, right? Yadanath?
Well, I wouldn't say just in Jersey. I'd say we're in Jersey.
You're just in Jersey.
You don't want to minimize it.
Yeah, I get all kinds of flack from Jersey people who tell me how much I put down Jersey.
I can relate to that so much because as a native New Yorker, but then having lived in New Jersey for 7 years and now in Connecticut for a few years, I'm like on all sides of that. I'm not sure where my loyalties even are at this point.
Nobody puts down Connecticut. I'm not sure why. Nobody puts down Connecticut.
It's just irrelevant.
There's something about Jersey that people just get all up in arms about. I love Jersey. I'm a convert.
In many ways. I love being from Jersey because it's funny. Because of the jokes. I like being a part of that.
Yeah, he's not actually from New Jersey. He just creates that persona so that he has jokes.
Okay, so now that that's blown, thank you very much.
Oh, no, I would not be here.
Akanta Bhakti's protesting. She doesn't have the natural affection for New Jersey that I do. Rasanath, can you shift gears and do the class on New Jersey?
That was the plan. The plan
Well, that was
was,
the plan all along.
to actually say, like, we'll talk about how Krishna appears in the material world, and it's like going from New York to New Jersey. That was actually saying that. So
Wait a minute.
I just wanted to give it time. People settle down before I.
In the 10th chapter of the Gita, doesn't Krishna say, "Of states I am New Jersey"? Didn't I read that somewhere? I gotta check the database on that.
It goes from the spiritual world to the material world. It's like going from New York to New Jersey.
There's also a river in between.
Yes.
It's actually perfect.
That really worked for you, Doyle.
It did. Clicked. I'm gonna have to go on video in order to not distract the class. Oh, Krishna Tulsi Rani, welcome. Good to see your name on the screen. I don't know if your wonderful husband with us also, but glad you're here. So, anyways, yeah, please, Rasanath, we're all here to hear from you. You got us all warmed up.
Okay, so I'll start with the recitation of prayers. So maybe everyone can mute and just follow along and recite with the microphones muted, so that way there's no echo. Om Agyan, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kada Mahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sakrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Hey Paul, welcome. Venkata, you're driving.
Krishnanga is driving, but we are in the car. Yeah.
Oh wow, wow.
We're doing a milk run to Gitanagari actually. So.
Oh, that's nice. That's really nice. I know she also loves to drive fast.
She does. So I'll have to tell her to calm down so we can listen to Bhagavatam with rapt attention.
Well, anyway, thank you.
Very well.
Very well. Welcome all for the Bhagavat-Sravana program. And today's topic, we're starting a new series on the appearance of Lord Krishna, because in a couple of weeks, actually next week, is Krishna's appearance, Janmashtami, which is one of the two bigger festivals that we have in the tradition, in the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition. And the reason why I had to pause and think about it, because it came to my mind that you never hear the celebration of Janmashtami in Gaur Leela ever. It's very interesting. But you hear a lot about the Rath Yatra, like year after year after year. And something about Mahaprabhu's appearance that is, again, non-different from Krishna's appearance. So those two festivals, Gaur Purnima and Krishna Janmashtami, are the biggest festivals that we celebrate. And then there are others too. These are the two big ones. So in the process of really preparing our consciousness and getting ready for Krishna's appearance, we will discuss a little bit about the appearance of Lord Krishna today, and in the next 3 weeks as well. So that was going to be the topic. And so as I was thinking about Krishna's appearance in the material world, specifically on this earth, as I already mentioned before others joined, that it's like going from New York to New Jersey. This is by the special request of Yadunath Prabhu. But the appearance of Lord Krishna in the material world has a very special significance for a bunch of reasons. And if we were to really understand this from Krishna's perspective of what it is like to come into the material world or come to the material world, it is not a pleasant experience. And here's the reason why. Have you ever gone to places where you feel you're not actually welcome? What's the effect of that? How do you feel when you have to go to a place where you're not welcome?
You don't want to be there.
You don't want to be there. Yes. But anything else?
You feel sad,
You feel sad,
alienated.
alienated. Yes. What else?
You could have like a small sense of self, or your sense of self could be somehow harmed.
Yeah, your sense of self can be somehow harmed. Yes. Any other effects?
There could even be anger towards the people there, or resentment.
Yeah, and it's so funny in today's day and age how we can actually keep playing the tape of how they must all be enjoying without me, and our wounds just get so much deeper. But yeah, it's a very unpleasant experience to go to a place where you're not welcome. So the reason why that context is so critical, and especially relevant for the times that we are living in, is, and Prabhupada in the introduction of the Srimad Bhagavatam, he repeatedly writes, I was just reading it today morning, he talks about how the idea of godlessness, right? And what is a godless civilization? The whole purpose of the material world was to actually forget Krishna. And the statement is just very clear: Krishna, you're not welcome here. This is, and Krishna facilitates this too, because he cares. The responsibility, and if you were to call the job of being God, is a very difficult one. Because if we feel sometimes, damned if I do, damned if I don't, God feels that immensely. And we all know how man is made in the image of God, in the sense that when we understand our own feelings and study it in the context of the relationships that we experience in the material world, not exactly the same way, but the seeds of those feelings, the seeds of those experiences exist in us because they actually exist in Krishna. So that's why the Shastras also say that many times by studying the soul and the nature of the soul, you can also understand the nature of God, and vice versa. So man is made in the image of God, and the feelings that we experience is also experienced by Krishna. May not be for the same reasons, in the sense we experience so many things in this world because of a false ego. But there is a true ego. Feelings of hurt, pain, loss, sadness, those are universal, and in many ways they also exist in Krishna. And because they exist in Krishna, they also exist in us. So the Srimad Bhagavatam very beautifully elaborates on this. In the third canto of the Bhagavatam, there is the section of Hiranyaksha, who is considered to be a great demon, and Hiranyaksha fighting with Varahadev, and Varahadev is an incarnation of Krishna. And there is a whole set of verses in the third canto where where Hiranyaksha is actually hurling insults at Varahadev. And it's very, very, like he calls Varahadev, he addresses him by calling him an amphibious beast. And there is a whole set of verses that are essentially deriding the Supreme Lord, right? And the Bhagavatam very beautifully then shows what's Krishna's heart. And it doesn't hide the fact. It's beautiful. It says, when Varahadev heard all of these things coming from Hiranyaksha, the Bhagavatam explains that Varahadev was hurt. He actually felt hurt. So one would wonder, well, this is God. How can God feel hurt? That's because God is a person. And when a person has feelings, a person has personality, and especially in the context of a relationship, then a person experiences the various dimensions of emotion. So if we were to really see and understand Krishna's heart, then we will also, it does make sense that coming to the material world is not such a pleasant experience, because most of the people in the material world do not want, the material world was created for the purpose of forgetting God, for forgetting Krishna. And then there are some people who want to then understand God, discover and build a relationship with God. But it's a very, very small population, right? The majority of the population doesn't want anything to do with God, doesn't want God to be here. Right? So in many ways, Krishna's coming to the material world is not such a pleasant experience. And the Gita explains the two things that Krishna appears for, right? What are the two reasons why Krishna appears in the material world? This is the famous verse.
When there's a decline in religion,
There's a decline in religion.
then he comes to help with that, to
Yeah, he
bring
comes to help with
to
that.
bring religion.
Yes, he comes to help with bringing religion. And why? Why is that? Why is that so? Why is that so important?
It's disturbing the devotees.
Serving the devotees. Yes, somebody else had.
Yeah, I was about to say that isn't it a decline in values and morality when that happens as well?
Yeah, it is a decline in values and morality, definitely, but it's actually a decline in spirituality.
Yes.
And that's the key. You will. It's the decline of morality and values is a natural result of the decline of spirituality. And as much as we actually try to separate those two things, we will also begin to see that it's very hard to preserve morality, because ultimately morality requires accountability. Because the ego is not accountable, right? So morality requires accountability, and at least on a very basic level, what spirituality is accountability to God, which then creates the foundation for morality. So you're absolutely right. There is a decline in. So when Krishna uses the word dharma, in that dharma also means morality and values. What the dharma that Krishna is talking about is spirituality. It's actual religion, right? So he says dharma samstapanarthaya, to re-establish dharma. And Doyal put it out in the chat. Hari bol, Garsharan. See you. To deliver the pious and to annihilate the miscreants, as well as to re-establish the principles of religion, I myself appear millennium after millennium. This is from the Gita 4.8. Paritranaya sadhunam. So he says to protect the devoted, sadhunam, the honest, the the people who are truly devoted to God. Vinashaya dushkritam. So so when you say paritranaya sadhunam and vinashaya dushkritam, right? Those are two extremes of so if you think about the population, so there are sadhus, and then there are, what you call dushkritam. And so what happens in between? Where is the majority? It's a question.
Complacent. The majority are complacent.
The majority are complacent, right? And the majority are influenced. And this is the challenge. The majority are influenced by one or the other, right? So when we see, especially when there are true sadhus and when there are real, there's just wickedness and evil, and there are like very demoniac forces that, what Krishna calls as dushkritam. Dushkrita literally means in Sanskrit, dushkrita, one who does bad. That's the literal translation of the word dushkrita. It's like, right, the whole thing is just not right. So many of us make mistakes, we unwittingly cause suffering, right? But for the dushkrita, the intention is to create suffering. And that is because the ego is just so deeply self-absorbed that essentially a dushkrita is a person who's trying to be God. That's it, right? Complete control, wanting complete control on everything. So, and then you see the majority of the population in between, which is very strongly influenced by those energies. And we see that's why Krishna's speaking of the 16th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. The divine and demoniac forces, the divine and demoniac natures, right? That is not to say, well, there are devotees and there are demons. That's not the point. The point is that there is a divine nature and then there is a demoniac nature. And then the living entity gets influenced by both. Most people, at least. Right? What's that? Hello?
Oh, Hariwell, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just it's a minor point, but I also like another dimension to this idea that dushkrita means literally like one who does bad stuff. I think he said, right, one who does bad things. Because in one sense, you could take it as you're saying, someone who like habitually or kind of like categorically does bad things.
Right.
But that also means, if I'm honest with myself, then I'm also dushkrita, because how can I say I don't do bad things? It may not be every moment of every day, but
yes,
at least occasionally I'm doing things, I'm performing actions that I'm not proud of, that are taking me farther from Krishna, that are hurting others. So I really like the idea of not just that the majority of people are influenced, but that in one sense, the majority of people do have a little bit of a dushkrita and a little bit of a sadhu within us.
Absolutely. And our nature is to be a sadhu, right? Like that's the beauty of it. The beauty of it is even when the tendencies of dushkrita exist, our nature deep down is ultimately that we are spirit souls, eternally Krishna's servant, which is undeniable. And a part of the demoniac response, which is so incredibly powerful, is that I hate the fact that I'm actually made to serve God. So in one sense, the dushkrita is actually self-hating. And this is the consciousness of but it wouldn't necessarily come out that way. But I hate the fact that I am made subordinate. I am made to serve Krishna. I just don't like that. I don't like myself. That's where it begins. So thank you for saying that. So we do have, while yes, we do have the tendencies. In reality, our real nature is a sadhu, and the acceptance of that real nature is our journey to Krishna. Right. So So Krishna's coming. Thank you for that point. Anything else to that?
Tulsi Radhi has her hand up.
Oh, thank you.
Do you want to say something, Tulsi? You can just unmute yourself.
Haribo.
Haribo, good to see you.
Hare Krishna, so nice to see you too. It's something, as you were speaking, and also something I've thought about before in terms of like the qualities of like the demoniac and divine qualities. I was thinking it's really interesting because I can observe in myself the that even when doing devotional service, which is meant to be divine, like because it's for Krishna, that we can still have this demoniac quality of trying to be in control of like the service and how it works out, and
Yeah.
And that's really interesting. And I've never really been able to wrap my head around it. I mean, I can understand devotional service in the 3 modes, but it's interesting how it can be simultaneously divine and demoniac. I'm wondering if you can shed some light on that.
It's the ego by nature is demoniac. If you really see the genesis of the ego and why the false ego exists, it is to actually give us the sense that we are God. And that's how Prabhupada defines the if you read multiple places in the Bhagavatam and the Gita, asurim bhavam ashrita, right? Like when you read what asurim bhavam ashrita is, it's this fervent desire to want to lord over material nature. And that's what the ego's role is, right? So many times when we say me, we have to ask ourselves the question, well, which me am I referring to? Am I referring to the false me or the true me? And because the ego and the soul, at least in the conditioned stage of life, the ego and the soul are living simultaneously. It's a very schizophrenic experience. Because we are still identified with the ego, but we are wanting to break free of it. But we haven't landed on the other side yet. We still don't have the full experience of what the soul is. So it's no man's land. It's a very schizophrenic experience, which is also when Prabhupada calls the living entity, or that's how Tatastha Shakti, the marginal potency, works. It can sometimes be under the influence of internal energy and sometimes under the influence of external energy. And we can experience that in this material body. How quickly we can be swayed. The whole Tatastha makes so much sense. The marginal energy makes so much sense. And because we are the marginal energy of the Supreme Lord, as soon as we take shelter of Krishna's external energy, then we are on the other side, right? And then as soon as we take shelter of Krishna's internal energy, then we're on a different side. So the living entity has freedom of choice. That's never taken away. And inherent in that freedom of choice is inherent in that freedom of choice is the possibility of us taking shelter of material energy. Does that make sense?
We have a
Sorry. Oh, go ahead, Doyle.
No, go ahead, Tulsi. I just wanted Mangalarti also her hands up too. So
yes, thank you. I'm not able to see. Thank you, Doyle. Really appreciate that.
Go ahead, Tulsi, if you wanted to respond or share your question.
No, it's interesting how like even like in a second we can take shelter of. It's like, no, I'm doing this service for Krishna, and the ego's like, no, you're not. You're doing the service for you. And it's like this. I really liked the how you use the word schizophrenic in terms of how the aspiring devotee exists in the world. because that really resonates, you know.
Well, what happens to the aspiring devotee is, so a big part of anartha nivritti stage of our spiritual life, and anartha nivritti being removing or getting rid of the unwanted things that come in the way of our relationship with Krishna. A big part of the experience of anartha nivritti is the schizophrenic experience. And it's only, and what is interesting is anartha nivritti is actually an advanced stage, even though it doesn't feel like that, because we are finally aware of our schizophrenic experience. and we are willing to take response. It's like, you know how when you've had schizophrenia your entire life, but you've never been clinically diagnosed. And I'm laughing not because it's very difficult for someone who has a clinically diagnosed schizophrenia. It's pretty painful. But when you get diagnosed and when you are like, you know what, okay, this is something that I need to take responsibility for, you've turned around. And that's a very big step. That's a huge step. It's actually worthy of celebrating. The challenge arises because in the stage of anartha nivritti, the potential to turn back exists, right? So that's why what we need are cheerleaders on both sides. Like, hey, you know, keep going. And in the absence of that cheerleading, in the absence of the constant reminder, hey, you know, like keep your focus, keep looking ahead. In the absence of that, then the potential is that we actually like look back and say, oh, maybe I should just go back. That's why Sangha is so important. It's not feel good, actually. It's a necessity for us to walk this very difficult phase now that we have arrived here. So it's congratulatory. It's worthy of congratulations, and then it's worthy of a lot of encouragement. That's what we need.
Mangalarti, did you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you so much, Gauranga Prabhu. Please forgive the video being off. Rasanath Prabhu, this point is so deep about Tatastha Shakti and about the competing aspects of our identification with the body. And so what I'm thinking about, and I'm wondering what your thoughts are on this idea about, I'm thinking of Mamai Vangso Jiva Loke Jiva Bhuta Sanatana, just this idea of, I've understood that, and I don't know, I'm curious what you think about the body itself not being the problem, about being in a body not being the problem, but about complete identification with the body as being the problem, and a way of harmonizing the different parts of ourself that leave us feeling, use the word schizophrenic, and just feeling a rift. And I'm sure many of us aspiring practitioners feel that way at different times in our lives. We feel pulled in different directions. I know it comes up for me even when someone asks me what my name is. Which side of what name am I? So that a key to harmonizing the different aspects of ourselves could be, and I'm curious, I want to do a deep dive on this shastrically, deep dive into the idea of embodiment and having a body and what that means, and at every moment being faced with an opportunity to use the body that Krishna gave me in alignment with his service, or dedicating the results of the activity to his service, as opposed to, for me, really striving to, give it up and not, and sort of rejecting my body.
Yeah.
That it's more about the identification and the consciousness that I can then use that God-given gift in Krishna's service. It's something I've been wrestling with particularly the last week after some talks I've had. And I'm curious to hear what you think. Sorry for the long-winded.
No, it's such a fantastic point. They're completely consistent with the idea of the schizophrenia. And also, especially as we are embodied living entities, we have a material body. This is a very practical question because we have to be performing devotional service in this body and use everything in Krishna's service. So thank you for that. I was reading Sri Bhakti Aloka last week, and it happens to be, I love Sri Bhakti Aloka. It's Bhakti Vinod Thakur's commentary, essays on two verses from the Nectar of Instruction. A few verses actually, but he focuses a lot on a couple of them. And in Sri Bhakti Loka, Bhakti Vinod Thakur's point, he writes in such a comprehensive and yet so in such a practical way. He talks about the idea of what it is to be embodied, and how through our phase of being embodied, we actually step by step go closer to Krishna. It's specifically with regard to the 2 points about niyamagraha and niyamagraha, following principles too strictly, and then completely ignoring any principles. And it's funny, Venkata, this also very strongly favors the conversation around being liberal versus conservative, but without touching that too much. What Bhakti Vinod Thakur says is the recognition that I am in a specific stage of life, in a specific body. So how do I follow the needs of the body and satisfy it in a very proper way, dharmic way, while keeping my vision on the next stage is the idea of progress, right? And that's how the balance is created. So even in our work, in the work that we do, many times people tell us, hey, I need balance, I really want balance. And what they're really telling me is, hey, just get rid of the tensions in my life. But the interesting thing about balance is not the elimination of tension, it's the optimization of tension. If a structure needs to stand, it has opposing forces. Right? If opposing forces don't, if there are no opposing forces, then the structure doesn't stand. A bike doesn't move forward. So these opposing forces are necessary, and they are also intrinsic, they are inherent. So the idea is, how do we optimize those opposing forces? That is the need for the following of principles at different stages of life. So, to answer your question, the Bhagavatam is talking about, at the end of it, there is no real harmony, is what the Bhagavatam is saying. According to Srimad Bhagavatam, it's like, Dharmo projita kaitavatra paramo nirmatsaranam satam. That's the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's the stage, it is really talking about the stage of life where you have made the firm resolve that it's done. Everything with the material body is done. And now that doesn't mean the Bhagavatam is not applicable before. The entire journey of our life is that goal. But at some stage, that becomes just very strongly activated. That just becomes like, this is it. Right? Now, before that, it's important to, and this is what Bhakti Vinod Thakur says, it's important to follow principles of varnashram. He says you do not artificially eliminate those, because we're not at the stage of a Paramahamsa, or even not necessarily fully aspiring for that. Right? So then, based on the stage of life and where we are, it's important to actually take what the physical body and the emotional mind needs, while keeping our gaze very strongly on advancing the soul's relationship with Krishna. So that's one part. The second part is, if we do follow Varnashrama properly, Daivi Varnashrama specifically, then we will see that automatically the body gets engaged. Everything gets engaged in Krishna's service. Does that help?
So much. Thank you, Rasanath Prabhu.
Oh, thank you.
Something I was thinking. Can I say something, Rasanath?
Please, of course.
I really appreciate what you're sharing and how well you lead discussion. It's really inspiring, and the questions also. Mangalarti, I was appreciating that question also, and the reference of Bhakti Aloka that I was, because last year I was also studying Bhakti Aloka a little bit too, and he's going through those verses of, the 6 things that are favorable and the 6 things that are not favorable, and he mentions how some of these things, like niyamagraha, for example, or these different ways of, I'm just looking at the verse here, it was atyahara, for example, or prayashas. And so he's saying that there's a way that they do it for householders and a way that it's done for sannyasis.
Yes.
So he says that there's actually different ways that it's done according to one's dharma in life. And I was just thinking also for Mangalarti, you were mentioning a deep dive into Shastra. A place that I would love to look into that is another text with Bhaktivinoda Thakur is by Jaiva Dharma. He talks about these 2 dharmas of the soul, the conditional dharma and the eternal dharma. So we all have the same eternal dharma. That's Savai Pungsang Paro Dharmo Yato Bhakti Hoksajay, that eternal dharma of the soul to be a selfless servant of Krishna. Then he talks about this nature. I haven't studied it much, but I was just referencing it as a place that might be good to look, because I haven't looked at it much. But he talks about living in this constitutional dharma, or this conditional dharma that he references very specifically in this world. So it might be there might be some really good stuff in there that might elaborate on that discussion.
Yeah, it's so, and even with our acharyas, right? It's if you see their writings, you'll see Saraswati Thakur and Srila Prabhupada also very, very strongly in the mood of Saraswati Thakur, was exclusively focused on one part, which was Parodharma. It was very strong, very, very strong. That was their focus for a reason, because that was what was necessary to push bhakti very strongly, because bhakti was clouded, and so you had to make it absolutely unequivocally clear what bhakti is. And then you see in the writings of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, you'll see he'll talk about both. He'll talk about varnashram. He'll talk about paying attention to our deha dharma in some ways, while keeping our gaze very fixed on our eternal dharma. That's why Jaiva Dharma was it's one of his most important works.
Rasanath Prabhu, can I ask for clarification on Parodharma?
Mm-hmm.
Are there devotees, are there Paramahamsas who are embracing the Parodharma, who are in a body,
mm-hmm.
who do not neglect the body? In other words, I'm thinking about examples of those who have attained the state, who are ultimately embracing our ultimate dharma and experiencing the highest levels of prema bhakti in relationship to Krishna, and yet still expend energy to maintain the body.
Yes. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's it. I just wanted to clarify that point. I know for me, particularly in my early days, my image of an advanced devotee, I always had this physical image in my mind of the renunciate. And then particularly in Goda Lila,
right.
Reading the stories of devotees at those highest stages,
right.
Still maintaining the body, or even maintaining their work or their income or something like that in service to Krishna, I found particularly inspiring, as it threw my conception off, which are moments that I appreciate most in my spiritual life. So I just wanted to ask for clarification. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. That's why Gaur Leela is so powerful, because you'll see most devotees, most of Mahaprabhu's personal associates were actually grihastas. In fact, like even in the Panchatattva, there were 2 renunciates and 3 grihastas. And then a whole deluge of devotees who were actually grihastas. But even and this is the amazing thing about Mahaprabhu's associates, is even when they were in grihastashram, their lives looked very different. Thank you, Doyle. Their lives look very, very different. So, how do you imagine them in the Gaur Leela, 4 months, taking time off, going and spending time in Jagannath Puri? Right. It's amazing. They just traveled and they just lived. And then you'll also see so many references to, so in the Gaur Leela, there is a section where Mahaprabhu is glorifying all the devotees who come from Bengal. And he's specifically is talking to the devotees from Sri Khanda. And he gives 3 specific instructions for the devotees from Sri Khanda. Narahari Sarkar, who is who's a renunciant, Mukunda Das, who is a grahasta, and Raghunandan Thakur, who is the son of Mukunda Das, who is a brahmachari. And Mahaprabhu's instructions are very separate. And for Mukunda Das, who is a grahasta, Mahaprabhu actually literally says this, balance your spiritual life and your material life. That's his instruction. And to Narahari Sarkar, he basically says, just dedicate everything to Krishna. So you see the same principle, and all of these were pure devotees, pure souls, completely completely having given their life to Krishna, but stage of life and the role that they were playing required them for them to do that in a very specific way. So that's one element. The other element is when we naturally become spiritually advanced, the needs of the material body are not troubling us the same way. So, like for example, when you really study that, it was very disconcerting to me when I first came across Bhaktivinoda Thakur's schedule. I was just like, man, how did he do it? And you also see Prabhupada had a very similar. It was not that Prabhupada, that was just like, okay, Prabhupada was a renunciant, and therefore you could see strong similarities between Prabhupada's schedule when he had taken sannyas, and Bhakti Vinod Thakur's schedule when he was a grihasta. You'll see striking similarities between the two. And to me, that is just a sign of actual spiritual advancement. The material body, while it needs to be maintained, doesn't pull the same way. It's also particularly significant when someone predominantly lives in the mode of goodness. It's a very different experience of like their needs. The material body doesn't show up the same way. The needs of the material body doesn't show up the same way. So there are all these different gradations. So spiritual advancement naturally brings about, and this is why the Bhagavatam, Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojitaha Janyatyashu Vairagyam Jnanam Cha Yad Ahetukam. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur again in Bhakti Tattva Viveka, which is he explains, he uses this verse, he quotes this verse, and he talks about how the knowledge arising from actual advancement in devotional service brings about detachment. And it's not artificial, it's natural. And the word ahetuki there is actually to signify that it's natural, it's sahajik, it happens very organically as a result of somebody's advancement in bhakti.
Rasanath Prabhu, this is so deep. It's almost as though, tell me if I'm understanding correctly, is that the sustenance of the body is no longer motivated by fear, by passion, by goodness.
That's it.
But motivated by Krishna's will and Krishna's desire. Wow. Thank you so much. It's so deep.
Well, what you said was really deep. You you really captured it. That's it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rasanath Prabhu.
Allegra.
This has been beautiful. And since the beginning of this conversation, when you first brought up Tatastha, I've been thinking just so much of how we use the phrase razor's edge, just so marginal. And so at risk in every moment of, is my interest for my lower needs, my lower nature, or for service and love. And I think that even applies in relation to the body and this question of what do I really need and where is that sense of needs coming from, I think is something we can use every single day. Even that sort of a razor's edge thing of, am I even acting in a self-hating way or a self-loathing way towards the body, which is this gift from God, or towards those of others? I think I can definitely relate to Mangalarti's question about how do we relate to the body, especially when many of the examples we see are people who are so profoundly renounced and, live on just water or something. And it's like, oh, am I supposed to aspire to that? And it can be interpreted as a self-hating or anti-body thing. It can be taken that way. But, I think there's another way to look at it as well, which is that, I feel I'm choosing to place so much trust in Krishna that I know my needs will be taken care of. In this specific circumstance of sannyasis in historic times, they also knew that others in society would look after them. That was a social system. Yeah. But I think even for us nowadays, with my own sense of my needs or the things that I get anxious or worked up about, will I get this or will I get that? It's an exercise that I could do every day of, hey, can I actually trust that Krishna will provide that in the way it needs to be provided instead of getting worked up about it?
Yes, and that's the definition of Shraddha in the CC. Shraddha Shraddhe Vishwasa Kore Sudrida Nishchaya Krishna Bhakti Hoile Sarva Karma Krita Hoy. Right, that's Mahaprabhu's definition of Shraddha. If somebody can capture that verse and put the translation in the chat, that'll be very helpful. Thank you, Dayal, if you can. Shraddha Shraddhe Vishwasa Kore. Gaur-Sharan Prabhu or anybody else, do you know what the verse number is?
I can find it.
Okay. Sorry, I don't remember off the top of my head. But I think it's what you said, Allegra, it actually very directly captures that. That's the definition of Shraddha. That's the definition of faith. Is that by serving Krishna, all my needs will be met. Right. Now, in the absence of that Shraddha, that kind of Shraddha, there is also other forms of Shraddha. Right. But they are what Bhaktivinoda Thakur calls, they are called Chaya Shraddha. They're not like real Shraddha, they are actually reflections of Shraddha. And so again, that's not to say that Shraddha doesn't exist. It exists in not its truest form. And that's something that we can all relate to. We have some semblance of faith, but it's not come to a point where it's matured to that place where just by serving Krishna. Now this is Bhaktivinoda Thakur saying, he says, when one arrives at that point, that's when bhakti begins. That's when sadhana bhakti actually starts. And that doesn't mean that we have let go of needs. What it does mean, though, is that internally, mentally, I have decided that's where I want to be. I have made the resolve. That's where I want to be. I want to be at a place where my my Shraddha is that just by serving Krishna, everything else will be taken care of. And once we actually, that's what determination is. When Krishna says in the Gita 9:30, Api chetu duracharo bhajante mam ananyabhak sa sadhu reva samantavya samyak vyavasito hi saha. Even if one has performed the most abominable activities, if that person is rightly situated in determination, I consider that person to be a saint. That's the determination. I have decided that I want to be Krishna's servant. Now, so what we have to visit is our decision. Have we made that decision for Christ? Didn't mean to say it that way, but that's what it is. It's that internal decision of, okay, have I decided to give my life for Krishna, or have I decided to become Krishna's servant? And once that decision is made, everything else will come. Any other thoughts, questions? So it's all started when we were talking about why Krishna comes to the material world and what his experience is coming to the material world. In a place where he's not wanted, really. And yet he does, because paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkratam. He comes for the purpose of protecting, and in this case, protecting essentially means one is protecting the faith, preserving the faith of the people who are very devoted to him, but also then protecting the consciousness to actually create an environment where those people whose consciousness are devoted to Krishna can actually spread and influence the rest. So vinashaya cha dushkritam is a byproduct, and this is important. It's a byproduct of paritranaya sadhunam. Right? It's not, and the reason why vinashaya cha dushkritam is important. It's not like Krishna, okay, okay, I'm excited about going in there and killing people. It's hard. Every single time, Krishna has to fight a demon. It's a living entity who is eternally his servant. Right? It's not I have to do that because I have to protect the devotees. Right? So even when Krishna comes to the material world, his task is not, it's painful. Because he has to do this, and we don't understand. This is important when we understand the heart of God. It's not because he has an ego that feels like, okay, these people are against me, and that's why he does this, despite the fact that that's why the closest thing that you can understand Krishna's heart is when you have to parent or take care of someone and they're really being irresponsible and you don't know what to do with that because you also love them. It's agonizing. And this is where damned if you do, damned if you don't, because if you're trying to correct them, it's painful. Because that's love. And then you also can't correct them because then they're so rebellious that they just push you further away. What a difficult task. So Krishna takes that on and he comes to the material world. And more importantly then, and this is why Krishna comes, when he comes to the material world, he also comes with his devotees, because through the performance of his pastimes, it's also then possible, and this is the, it's also possible to influence the population in between, somehow give them an opportunity to participate, give everybody an opportunity to participate, specifically the people in between who are so easily influenced by the sadhunam or the dushkratam energies, right? So that's Krishna's heart. And so Janmashtami, when we think about Krishna's appearance in this material world, and especially like Krishna comes here to perform. God, like Krishna actually comes here to perform. It brings the spiritual world alongside, so that we who have actually made the choice to not want anything to do with it, get the opportunity to experience and perhaps change our minds. And perhaps change our hearts, so that we can actually look in a different direction. And he never stops doing that. So the Srimad Bhagavatam, the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam, which speaks about Krishna's appearance, is highlighted by, it's the beginning of the 10th canto is phenomenal in the sense that when Krishna appears, it's not a pretty situation. It's not for no one. Like Parikshit, when the 10th canto is just about to be spoken, Parikshit has basically a few hours, right? Then when you enter the story of Krishna, what's happening with the demigods, right? Like Mother Earth has taken the form of a cow. Why? And it's not an unrelatable thing at all, especially in 2020, where we are right now. And it's possible, it's completely possible. We shouldn't rule out the possibility that right now, perhaps the demigods and Mother Earth are actually praying to see how the earth can actually be rebalanced. Right? Somehow it's not like a distant, it's like, okay, it happened more than 5,000 years ago. No, it's happening. Because the world is, like, if we are so bothered, if we are so affected, so is Earth. Right? Because she is the mother, it's like she is witnessing this happening. Like it's happening in her womb. It's painful. Right? And so she is praying to Krishna to appear. And if you really focus on the Bhagavatam is pretty amazing, because it talks about the alliances that were created. Thank you. Allegra was saying it is happening now. All the Toltec priests, hires of the Incas, are doing their version of puja every day to aid the demigods in rebalancing the world. It's amazing, actually. Thank you. The Bhagavatam explains the alliances that have been created, that were created at that point in time. There's a verse where Kamsa is actually speaking about, he's basically reassuring himself, the alliances that he has. He has Jarasandha, Shishupal, Dantavakra. Like he's talking about, like, the axis. It's like each one of these individuals are like, they're terrible people, the lack of a better term. And this is Kamsa's alliance, and he actually lists in the Bhagavatam, like, what are my alliances? So Jarasandha, what was the relationship between Jarasandha and Kamsa? Anyone know?
Kamsa was Jarasandha's son-in-law?
Kamsa was Jarasandha's son-in-law. Kamsa had married Jarasandha's two daughters. And they were, was definitely like very aligned in their goals. It was basically universal conquest, and we see exactly that happening as we on this earth right now. You see the alliances that are forming from a point of view of the consciousness. It's pretty scary, and at the same time very relatable to the Srimad Bhagavatam. That's exactly how it was when Krishna appeared. So there was a predominant. So with Parikshit, he was helpless. He had only a couple of days to live. Then with the demigods and with Mother Earth, dire straits. Even Brahma did not know how to actually resolve this. It was beyond anybody's capacity to actually set this straight. They had to go to Vishnu, right? Very helpless situation. And the third thing then is the very direct, very direct, what was happening very locally was the situation of Vasudeva and Devaki. Wow, very painful. Right. On the day of her wedding, she was almost beheaded, and then she was thrown into prison. All her 6 children were killed. So Krishna's appearance, it's not a. It was not a, externally speaking, not a joyous occasion at all. It was dark times. Right? But what makes it so special is the consciousness of each one of these individuals. And it's explained in the prison when Krishna appeared. And you should see the consciousness of Vasudeva and Devaki. In his heart, Vasudeva actually gives away, thousands of cows. He's actually giving gifts to the Brahmins. This is like in prison, right? It's like there is no, his situation is very, very dire. And, he welcomes Krishna to this world in that way. Same thing with Parikshit, about to die, where it's so beautiful when this particular section of Krishna begins in the Bhagavatam. King Parikshit is just like, go on, do not pause, do not, and he explicitly tells Shukadeva Goswami, hey, if you're worried about me, not having eaten, not having, had anything, or if you're worried that I need some time to just prepare, do not worry about it. Just continue reciting Krishna Katha, just go full steam ahead, right? That is the consciousness. That's what makes Krishna's appearance. And what is interesting with that consciousness is that Krishna has already appeared even before he appears. The experience of Krishna has become so strong. The desire for Krishna has become so strong that Krishna has already appeared before he appears. So the idea behind this is to prepare our consciousness. And tomorrow is the appearance day of Balaram, which was non-different from Krishna, as this Chaitanya Charitamrita and the Bhagavatam describe Balaram. But Balaram also represents a very important principle. Balaram represents the Guru Tattva. Thank you, Dayal, again for that verse. It's a beautiful verse from King Parikshit from the 10th canto. You just see his consciousness. Because of my vow on the verge of death, I have given up drinking water. Yet because I'm drinking the nectar of topics about Krishna, which is flowing from the lotus mouth of your lordship, my hunger and thirst, which are extremely difficult to bear, cannot hinder me. He says the person who was very disturbed because he was thirsty. That's what led to this whole thing, right? That's what led to the entire Srimad Bhagavatam unraveling, was Parikshit unable to tolerate his thirst and garlanding the the sage with the snake. So it's shifting our focus back to Balaram. The reason why Balaram's appearance happens before Krishna's appearance, and we've heard this several times, is Balaram creates the place for Krishna to appear. And in our lives, the experience of Balaram actually directly happens through the spiritual master, because the spiritual master prepares the ground for Krishna's appearance. It's impossible for Krishna to appear without Balaram Tattva showing up in our life. So when we celebrate Balaram's appearance day, we also are celebrating Balaram's role in our life, which is the role of the Guru. And none of us would be here without Balaram. Right, so I would like to stop there and take any questions, reflections, comments, anything at all, discuss.
In half a mile, use the right two lanes to take exit 247 for I-283 toward Harrisburg, East Pennsylvania 283.
Haribol, can you hear me?
Yes, now I can.
All right. Thank you so much. It was such a great, kind of very reflective thought about. Sorry if you heard GPS. There's such a really kind of like deep reflective take on Krishna's appearance.
Continue for 3 miles.
I just wanted to share that your analogy of a parent and a child for the way Krishna approaches this task of killing demons, I thought was just like so spot on. And I was thinking in a like kind of a more extreme version of that analogy, if there's a parent, for instance, I was just thinking like, imagine there's a parent that has 2 children, and one of those children becomes controlled by like a drug addiction. And that drug addiction has a hold over that child so much that under the spell of that addiction, that child is willing to even hurt their sibling or hurt their parents to kind of get their next fix, right? And so then the parent, it's like such a thankless like part, but the parent has to like show their love for the child that is being hurt and is being victimized by protecting them, and then also show their love for the child who's acting out under the kind of the hold of this addiction by somehow or other freeing them of this addiction, which may require doing really difficult things like drawing really hard boundaries or apparently being very cruel to them, right? So like in some situations, a parent might need to cut a child off or physically restrain them. Or even like they talk about interventions, like having an intervention, which is like such a painful, confronting, situation. And so just thinking about Krishna's appearance as this kind of like intervention really puts it into like this whole other perspective for me, where it's like such a thankless task, and at the same time, it's like such an awesome display of the heart of this parent that loves both of these children. I just wanted to share that, like that's a thought that's swimming around in my head right now.
Thank you for so beautifully expanding on that. I as you were speaking, I was noticing I was getting teary-eyed because of how difficult the situation is. And if we were to really understand the heart of God, so when Krishna kills demons, we say Jai, and I understand the sentiment behind, but it actually doesn't. It's not. It's Jai because now righteousness can again flourish, hopefully, and also how we say Krishna's killing is good because the person who gets killed also gets the benefit of because Krishna's heart is good. Krishna is all good, but it's never a pleasant experience. It's never a pleasant experience. And the Ramayana actually really brings this forth in a very beautiful way. Because after Ravana is killed, you can see how Lord Ramachandra arranges for Ravana's final rites. And it's actually very, it's very touching. So you see the heart of, you really see the heart of God. There is no ego. Nothing. So thank you for saying that. Any other thoughts?
Okay. So I know it's almost 12:30. I'll just ask one quick thing. As my husband's throughout his worship, I've been thinking about Lord Nrsimhadev lately and the experience of Chaduskritam, the annihilation of the demons, and Krishna's having Sarvagyan, and them not really being killed in that whole experience of, I had this conception of that it was almost a joyful experience for Lord Nrsimhadev or for Krishna. So you're presenting this whole different facet is really sort of widening my perspective or playing on that idea. So it's just, I'm just thinking about the different experiences that I wonder what it's like for the Lord in these past times, particularly for Lord Nrsimhadev.
Yeah, and also that's why one of the very interesting things is that when they say Krishna never leaves Vrindavan, and this is a subject of discussion in many ways. Krishna has to appear in a specific form in order to perform the task of killing demons. It's almost like how, you have to go in surgically. You can't necessarily, because it's too painful. So Krishna has to incarnate in a specific way. That's a personification of one of his energies in order to perform those tasks. But if you were to really understand Krishna and Vrindavan, that's not Krishna and Vrindavan. That's also the distinction between. That's why for us, Gaudiya Vaishnavas, the idea of Krishna and Vrindavan is such a special. It's a very special benediction to be able to actually understand the heart of God in that way, because that's where there is no display of power. Really, of course, when Krishna comes to the material world in Bhama Vrindavan, there is that you can see Krishna killing the demons. But again, there is a specific aspect of Krishna that does that work for him. But that's not. It's funny why you see Krishna outsources the material world to Maya. And that's why Maya performs the thankless task of reform, because it's very unpleasant. So then finally when Krishna has to come and do it, it's just like, it's not a very pleasant experience, but he has to do it and he does it.
Thank you, Rasanath Prabhu. This adds a whole nother facet of discussion to storytelling and the pastimes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Gaurashan Prabhu, please share. If you can unmute yourself and share, that would be wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you, Shmuel. I was just remembering of this also in the Srimad Bhagavatam when Duryodhana is lying down in the battlefield. So there it is clearly mentioned the Lord was not happy to see the scene.
Yeah, that's so true.
And Prabhupada in the purport also writes, actually the Lord is constrained to award punishment upon the wrongdoer.
Beautiful.
But he is not happy to award such punishments because the living entities are originally his parts and parcels. And Prabhupada writes, he is harder than a thunderbolt for the wrongdoer and softer than the rose for the faithful. The wrongdoer is misled by bad associates and by ill advice, which is against the established principles of Lord's order, and thus he becomes subject to punishment. The surest path to happiness is to live by the principles laid down by the Lord and not disobey his established laws.
Wow, that was so beautiful. Thank you for. I'm just picturing in my mind how that scene would have looked like. And
I really appreciated Prabhupada writing, the Lord is constrained to award punishment.
yeah, it's so beautiful, huh? This choice of words. Which verse?
This is about 3.13.
3.13.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is Vidura speaking to Uddhava. The conversation between Uddhava and
Yes. Uddhava remembering
Krishna. Beautiful. Thank you. Allegra, how does that relate to? So what's your? Can you ask your question?
Yeah. So with this image of Krishna kind of grieving at having to fight people and seeing just their condition, but then it's also said or written, I can't remember if this is purport from Prabhupada or in the Sanskrit, that when he was fighting Bhishma, Krishna was enjoying the rasa of chivalry with their fighting. So is the distinction there just the different moods that Bhishma in a devotional mood was enjoying, giving, kind of sporting with Krishna, whereas, this is not a devotional mood?
So this is a beautiful question. Anukulena Krishna Anushilanam Bhakti Ruchite, right? Like, so Rupa Goswami's definition of pure devotional service is Anukulena Krishna Anushilanam. It's aligned to Krishna's desires. So Bhishma's fighting with Krishna was actually completely aligned with Krishna's desire. And so it becomes Anukulya. Like, so the way it was experienced, the Bhagavatam describes how the arrows that Bhishma were shooting at Krishna, for Krishna, it felt like flowers falling on him. Because the heart was to actually satisfy. And in that situation, it's the devotee, Bhishma, who actually takes on the austerity of fighting the Lord. Which is, again, not a pleasant experience, but for the Lord's pleasure, then Daya Gauranga Prabhu, just when first-class devotional service develops, one must be devoid of all material desires, knowledge obtained by monistic philosophy and fruit of action. The devotee must constantly serve Krishna favorably as Krishna desires. So that's the qualitative distinction. So and that's why what it's said is that when one accidentally serves Krishna, so there's a question that arises in the Srimad Bhagavatam, where Yudhishthira is asking, well, how if Shishupal was such a demon? That's the whole story of, Prahlad Maharaj. But how did Shishupal actually get absorbed in the body of Krishna? How did he get liberation? I think it's inconceivable for me. And so Narada Muni's response to the whole thing is, somehow when Krishna kills, then, so this is the distinction between a devotee and someone who Krishna kills who is not a devotee. They can't enter the spiritual world. So the devotee gets liberation, someone who Krishna kills, a demon gets liberation, gets liberated from the material world, but can't enter the spiritual world. Whereas for Bhishma, it's a very different experience because it's favorably serving Krishna.
I remember Srila Prabhupada saying once, if you have to hate something, hate Krishna, because then he'll kill you and you'll.
Yeah, at least it's directed towards Krishna, even though unfavorably. And that's why anything, however you come in contact with Krishna, will purify you. Isn't that amazing?
It's amazing.
Just thinking about that is just so. And Prabhupada gives the example that fire purifies no matter what. Like it burns no matter what. That's its nature. So you come in contact with it, it will produce that effect, favorably or unfavorably.
It was a wonderful class. You did stray from the original New Jersey concept, though, but it was a good class. Thank you.
Well, I just wanted to say that New Jersey is a place where New Yorkers are not really welcome.
You always win.
That's my entire life, don't you know? You should know by now. Wonderful. Well, thank you all for being here. Have a wonderful, wonderful Balaram's Appearance Day. May there be a lot of spiritual strength in all of your lives, and may the world get the strength to rise spiritually at this time. And hopefully you all will have a wonderful Janmashtami as well. Thank you so much. Srila Prabhupada ki, Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Tagore Premanande, Hari Hari Bol.
His Grace Rasanath Prabhu ki.
Hare Krishna. Thank you all.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you.
There you go.
So much.
Thank you for strengthening us. We can keep strengthening one another this way.
That's it. That's the Sangha. That's it. Oh, it feels like old times again. No one wants to leave.
Nice to see you, bro.
There you go.